Okay. Well, sort of time to start.
All kinds are ready to go. Okay.
So, welcome everybody to this breakout room. Dons Kuklis is now based in Ventspils, and he's going to talk about student agency flipping the whole relationship. Over to you, Don.
Thank you very much, and good morning to everybody. Nice to see you here. I hope you take away some positives from the session that I'm about to do. There's a lot of conversation about the flipped classroom, looking at it from the teacher perspective, how to flip the classroom. I'm looking slightly differently at the student end of it, and that is the experience, or considering the experience of what students have when they're in a flipped environment. So I have a question for people. How many of you have tried flipping your lessons? If you can use the chat window on this side, just to indicate whether you have or have not flipped, that would be informative for me. Where's my... I'm not seeing chat, never mind. That's something I have to pick up. Okay, well, thank you for those that have reacted. Flipped classroom, in essence, it creates a visual impression of turning things upside down in the way that a coin is flipped. But that isn't necessarily the case. Let's move on. So, what's the point of flipping the classroom? And what are my objectives for this session? The first is to have a quick look at the Skola 2030 and how that might relate to a flipped learning environment. I'm also going to talk about how one system, the system of flipping, is replacing alternative types of systems. It is still a system. And what does the new learner journey look like in a flipped environment or in a Skola 2030 environment? Because the emphasis in the learner journey has changed. And learner journey is an expression which is used in the UK. My last teaching experience is in the UK. The whole emphasis there was learner journeys and the progress that the learner makes whilst they're working with you towards their final goal. It stopped short of student agency, but the principle was that it was the learner's journey and not the teacher's journey with a bunch of learners. Looking at the difference between group and personal space or time. We talk about classwork, we talk about homework, and in the flipped environment, we're really talking about group space and personal space. What are the new demands that are placed upon the students in a flipped environment, and how the flipped environment also will enable us to support differentiation much more effectively. So let's move on. Going to play a little video. Hope you can hear the soundtrack. It's running from my local drive. There are links available. There's another link underneath here so that you can visit an alternative video that we have, although this appears to be running rather slowly. It's a shame. It was a video made in the 1940s in an English school, and the video was made by the British Council. They were looking at how new education systems at that time were looking very much forward to the idea of students being parts of society and being contributing members of society. And there were a lot of echoes in both of those videos to what we're now seeing in Skola 2030. And I show them simply to emphasize the fact that if we want to see what is happening in the future in education, quite often there are a series of past references that we can draw from in order to learn and take our experience. So that video does not appear to be running. It ran in rehearsal, but we're not in rehearsal. Okay, I will supply the links to those that are interested. All right, so the old system, where are we at generally and where have we come from? Production line education, we push a whole load of students into an establishment at one end, and out of the other end comes a whole load of students who have learned stuff, accumulated knowledge, accumulated some experiences, and are able to demonstrate that understanding, that development in some form of standardized tests. In this environment, although the students may not necessarily like what is going on or feel comfortable what is going on, they know how to play the game. They sit in the classroom, they don't necessarily take on board too much, they don't put the hand up too often, and they're very passive in the process. They sit back, they watch videos, they maybe listen to the teacher giving their lecture part of the lesson, taking notes perhaps, some of them might take notes. And in this environment, we all know where we stand, or we all know where we stood. And progress is largely linear and one size fits all. And not much space for differentiation in such an environment. Evaluation is standardized, and therefore this enables comparisons to be easily made. And that form of education suits an environment where you want to measure things like value for money, which is largely why in England, for many, many years, the production line approach was one that was adopted. It started to change with looking at student journeys, learner journeys, and we started to see some elements of differentiation creeping in, some different forms of evaluation coming in. We started to see project-based education coming in, and a lot of the academic books started to support an emphasis of projects and teamwork. This crept in, but still was largely linear and standardized. Along comes the OECD with their looking at 2030 and the learning compass, and we start to hear student agency being talked about. Here, there is a shift where the students are encouraged to take responsibility of their own learning. It's up to them for their progress. It's up to them for their achievements. And the teacher-student relationship has subtly changed. It's looking to help students to develop cooperative relationships. And there's a lot more emphasis on pair work and group work. And this gives the teacher an issue in terms of how to evaluate the contribution made by individual students to pair and group work relationships. It's also looking to give students agency whereby they have a positive influence in society. And the reason I wanted to show the video that I had there at the front is that that was a key message that was coming out from the British Council back in the 1940s, 50s, where school children were expected to learn how to be positive and useful members of society when they finish their education. The big shift, of course, with the 2030 Skola program is that learning is non-linear, and there's also going to be a variety of assessment methods and options open to students. We see how that shapes up going forward. What happens is that the class becomes group space. The classroom becomes a group space thing rather than the classroom. And I'm mentioning the group space because the students are going to be working in pairs and groups and doing practical work within the group space. And then there is the counterpoint, the personal space that I will talk about in a moment. This means that students are able to get more personal time with teachers, means that conversations can happen with little groups of 4, groups of 2. Feedback can inform the students where they stand at the moment and where they need to make progress and to develop questions about their learning opportunities. Evaluations can be individualized and customized for the students. So they're starting to get more time from the teacher because of the flip process. Now, not every student is necessarily going to feel comfortable here, because in the factory approach, one size fits all, it's possible for students to hide inside a group and not to be face to face with the teacher too often. Although in the flipped environment, teacher-pupil contact time should increase, and this has a knock-on effect for your teaching activities. So the new demands that we're going to see for the student is that they're going to take responsibility for setting their own goals. They're going to identify what they need to learn. They're going to look at their own spiky profiles, where they have certain strengths in some areas and weaknesses in the other. They're also going to be responsible for managing their own time. And these are core life skills that the OECD see coming out of Skola 2030. They also have to develop an ability to work with others and to be accountable for their actions, not only as individuals, but within the context of teamwork. And this reflects greatly on the work environment that we're looking to prepare students for. They're going out into the workplace, and these are clearly targets which employers and commercial environments would like to see students coming forward to take up positions within their organizations. Ability to set goals, work to goals, multiple deadlines, multitasking, working with teams which may be next to them or remote from them, working in different time zones, different languages, and therefore in an international context, English for a large percentage of the globe takes a certain amount of precedence. But there are other 3 or 4, 5 other languages which in different parts of the world will enable the student also to be mobile as a worker. For the teacher, the new demands are that you're going to have to create new assets. And to do that requires time, and that's going to be demanding. And one of the key elements that came out of my research into this topic was that curating material in the first instance is going to be better use of time rather than trying to create assets. I was quite shocked to see how much money is involved in setting up a mini video studio for teachers to be able to create lessons where they're writing on the glass screen in front of the camera, and having to learn those kind of presentation skills and how to set that up technologically and to make it work and to manage the manipulation of the video files is quite demanding, I think, and we see how that will develop. But curating materials and making use of Google and Kahoot and a whole variety of different lesson element building tools that you can use, which provide assessment as well, is going to be initially demanding, but over the first year, second year, third year should start to settle down. What also came from the research that I was doing is that you don't necessarily need to flip all of the classrooms all of the time. And it's a mistake to think that the flipped working environment for students is going to mean that they have to do that every single session. And my suggestion is that you should look at key concepts and activities which take up a significant amount of group time, which is valuable time because that's where you are face to face with students. And it's not necessarily an efficient use of time. And 2 of the things that I saw on my research journey when I was preparing this is that reading tasks and listening tasks are 2 of the key tasks that you can actually flip and put them from the group space, the classroom space, into personal space. something which the student can do, not necessarily in the classroom. And I'm fudging on saying home tasks or homework, because that's not necessarily where this activity needs to take place. That enables the student to come to the group with perhaps questions that they want to ask. They've come across something which they don't necessarily understand. They're going to take responsibility for asking you, the teacher, to provide explanation for that, and the opportunity to practice those skills. So that frees up time, taking out those time-absorbing things, because my experience with listening and video tasks is that you keep pressing the play button. Oh, can you play it again? And you press the play button. I can't quite hear that. Can you press the playback? And so with listening and watching tasks, you find that it absorbs quite more time than you anticipate in a lesson. So this is going to free up time, and here comes the additional demand for the teacher, and that is that it creates space for you to offer more activities to practice the skills that they're absorbing in their personal space, personal study space. And that also leads us then to looking at researching places where you can curate material. YouTube is a great place for videos, because one of the other things that comes out of the flipping environment is that video is a heavy element. It's heavily used in flipped classrooms. For the group as a whole, they're going to see more pair work and team projects, and also with taking agency and taking responsibility. There's an introduction of self and peer assessment, perhaps with the teacher as a moderator rather than as an assessor. That is something which has been trialled on projects for many years in the UK, and the principle has originated with teachers marking coursework and then putting down a grade for summative assessment, which was then sampled, and in fact in Latvia with the speaking tasks. We have a visiting teacher who marks the tasks, and they're then sampled centrally to make sure that the marks that are awarded are relevant to the achievement of the student. And it's carrying that process down to student level, where we see self and peer assessment happening and teacher moderating, which potentially frees up some time. More speaking and reading practice has been proven to be beneficial for the acquisition of language and practicing the skills, and being able to use mobile technology to record that with the additional time that you find in the classroom, because you are taking out some of the tasks which are time heavy, will create an opportunity for more longer lasting and deeper learning to take place. Okay, so here's the kickback, looking at it from the student end. They don't do the personal space tasks is the big worry, which teachers have expressed in a number of surveys in environments where flipping has not been trialled. But they don't do the personal space tasks, so they turn up to the session having not watched the video or not done the reading material. And this can be assessed with some check questions, much like a CPD webinar. The thing is that if you're planning to flip a classroom, that you need to teach the student how to make use of the resources that are happening. So we have to look at teaching active learning. We have to teach the notion of taking notes. And these are not things which students practice ordinarily of their own volition. They need to be shown how to listen effectively to the videos and not to be passive. Video exercises and audio exercises are quite often fairly passive tasks, and they're simply going through the motions. We need them to be listening and watching effectively, and that skill needs to be taught before you start to think about the flipping. But the answer to that comes in the perennial question of how do you handle situations where the learner wasn't there for the lesson when you did the lecture, that they come in after you've actually finished the instructional part of the video, of the session, or they don't actually like the material that you're showing in these videos or these sound things, and they're saying that it's all very boring. The simple thing is to look at the classroom not necessarily as a whole group, but as a suite of learners who have a different space on the learner journey for that particular topic. And technology can help us address these issues in a flipped classroom. And this is tackled in the in-flip. So you're flipping a classroom within a classroom is the way in which to get your head around it. So we have 3 groups, perhaps, maybe 4, within a classroom environment. Those that haven't done the preparation material, or that they have not grasped the issues that are being looked at. A group of students who, with some support, are able to perform the tasks, and where you can give feedback to, and can get round them and talk to them as individuals, and an empowered group who are able to independently apply the concepts that you have produced and can work on tasks collaboratively. This process means that you can take on board the students who haven't done the videos at home. They can be working on looking at the video within the classroom environment, group space. You can have your tasks, which are across the whole group, where you're able to provide more work for individuals that need more support, and a group that are moving forward quite independently and who, in principle, don't necessarily need quite so much face-to-face time as the others. And that kind of neatly brings us back to a situation where I did my training in England, and we had groups sitting on different tables. And I put tables inside the quotes simply because these could be virtual tables that you don't really see, because we do not want to identify students who are perhaps needing more help than others in the way that that used to happen in English schools. You would have the low achieving table, the middle achieving table, and the top achieving table. And students would know this. They would know which one they were sitting on. And it was highly demotivational and was quickly dropped. But at the time of doing my training, it was a way of differentiating for students. And the working in virtual tables is a way in which we can differentiate in an in-flip environment. So this differentiation does not need to be visible to the bulk of the students that are involved in the group. And in this situation where you're working in virtual tables, then you can actually move away from personal space tasks. And in a number of schools that cropped up in the research that I was doing, I was able to see that some schools had moved away from the concept of homework in the flipped environment. And what is the overall goal? This video is going to work. We want students to be creative and collaborative and to think critically and communicative. And without comment, please just watch the bird. And there is the prize. And even throws away the spare piece of bread. So if we create the situation where the learner has identified the goals that they want to achieve and the targets that they set for themselves, they are more likely to engage in the process and therefore more likely to achieve the outcomes that we're looking for. So we've had a brief tour of the flipped classroom from the other end, looking at the students. We didn't get the view of 2030 from the past. Sorry about that. I have no idea why that video did not run. The second one did. But in principle, nothing is new in one way. From the 1940s and the 1950s, there was a lot of optimism about the future of education, and a lot of money was put into the development of new school environments, and these were filmed and recorded. And having found those, I was quite sad that because of budget constraints, a lot of the 2030 principles were dropped almost 60 years ago. To some extent, we're replacing one system with another, and we have to work out how the 2030 system will deliver something whereby employers, universities, and further learning establishments are able to make value judgments about the students that we offer to them with their qualifications. Student agency has replaced, certainly in the UK, the idea of the learner journey. That I have taken on board quite strongly. I'm planning to flip quite a few of the classrooms in September that I'm teaching. I'm starting to develop material for that using the internet with a blog site. And I've started to take on board the video production thing, which I was doing in the UK. And the big bonus for me is if you happen to have a whiteboard technology. Enables you to produce quite a lot of very deep, informative material without necessarily having to spend a lot of time doing it. I like the fact that we did talk about focusing on individual students with their individual needs. The virtual table approach enables us to differentiate and deliver material that's going to support the development of individuals. We also looked at the crow that learns. Incidentally, there are no end of examples of bird species that have adopted the fishing approach, and therefore supports my view that there is an international language across birdland, and that they do talk to each other. So now the students are all pretty much the right way up. And you have become an academic video producer. Maybe you have some questions, as I have now finished. So it is over to you.